Hey man, you want to do a read?
Whoa, I'm not into books.
Books are for crooks.
Yeah.
But you know what isn't for crooks?
No, tell me.
Long sliced beer.
Hey,
Have you ever had that stuff?
I don't have loose lips, my friend.
Oh.
Well, maybe I do, because I have, and it's delicious.
I like the Hops de la Vista, which is a delicious Indian Pale Ale. Mm-hmm. And you could pick some up at your local beer store.
That's right, because it's a local beer.
That's right. Mm-hmm. East End, baby.
Enjoy.
High five.
Okay. You don't know what that was.
Hi there, this is Greg LeGros
And this is Jamie Dew.
of Fully and Completely. You're listening to...
Welcome to Fully and Completely, the bi-weekly podcast where we chronologically look through the discography of the Tragically Hip. I can't fucking do it, man. That's Greg's domain. I'm sorry. Today's guest on Hipstories is writer and journalist Michael Barclay. Maybe you have read some of his pieces on the band during the last tour in Maclean's or elsewhere. Perhaps you've read some of his music writing over the years. Or maybe you have read or are reading or are going to read The Never-Ending Present, The Story of Gord, Downie, and the Tragically Hip, the book that Michael published earlier this year. So sit back and get ready to listen to the conversation that Greg and I had with Michael about his experiences with the band, writing the book, and some of his favorite tracks we're going to intersperse throughout the episode as well. So let's get right into things. This is Michael Barclay on Hipstories.
They shot a movie once in this hometown. Everybody was in it from miles around. Out at the speedway, some kind of Elvis thing. And I ain't no movie star, but I can get behind anything. I can get behind anything. Get it out, get it all out. Stretch that thing. Make it last, or make it all last. Please until the supper bell rings. Yeah, that taxi driver likes his rhythm, never like to stop. Yeah, there throws a passion, then throws a passion, then something just blew him off. Yeah, sometimes the faster things get, the less you need to know. But you got to remember, the smarter you get, the further you're gonna go. When things blow it hot dough. Woo! Baby, I feel fine. I'm pretty sure it's genuine. It makes no sense, it makes no sense. We take it free every time. Whoever fits it usually gets it. It was the strangest thing. How we move so fast into that boxing ring. Yeah, sometimes the faster it is, the less you need to know. But you got to remember, the smarter you get, the further you're gonna go. When you blow it hard dough. Down at that speedway, it's Aunt Margaret's scene. Well, I can't touch her, I can't get behind like a cow and a spoon. And good night, all. Thank you for coming to Stubbs Barbecue. Thank you, folks. Thanks for coming. Thanks to Wayne, band out of Birmingham. Thank you to Wayne very much, and all of you, and to our crew. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me here today.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, really exciting.
Good to be among geeks.
Yeah.
My own kind. I should clarify.
You are in the right place. Yes, absolutely. So, I guess to start off, tell us a little bit something about your background, your
Where it
story
all
leading
began?
up to.
The journey into writing.
Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Well, in the beginning,
Yes.
which are also the first three words of my book on purpose, I started writing for my high school newspaper. I started it after it had gone dormant. My friend Barb Pettick had started it, and Scott Humphrey, and then I took it over and had no idea what I was doing and couldn't believe that the principal gave me money to print this thing. And that was kind of amazing. And then university was just the first week I walked into the campus paper and said, I want to write. And I wrote about music every single week, became the entertainment editor the year after that. And after university, friends of mine started a magazine. So I went to work for them for pretty much literally peanuts. And everything went from there. That magazine lasted for 6 years. It was an alt weekly, similar to Now Magazine or I Magazine in Toronto. And then I worked at Exclaim Magazine, National Music Magazine, for a while. And then CBC's Brave New Waves, a radio show that changed my life more than once, as it turned out. In Montreal for 3 years. And then I worked at Maclean's for 8 years. That's the short story.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So you dove right in with music writing. That was pretty much.
It's pretty much all I've ever done, for better or worse.
Where did your interest and love of music come from?
I don't really know.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just born with it, I think.
Yeah, my dad was a big fan of a lot of different kinds of music.
Right.
My mom was a great appreciator of arts in general. Took me to see lots of things. I started playing piano at age 5. And huge ABBA fan then and now. That was the first big obsession.
That's great.
Anytime you're having a bad day, just put on an ABBA record. The world is just better. It's very important to my mental health. And then for whatever reason, always drawn to Canadian music, oddly enough.
Right.
And I don't know why that is. I was always very interested in stuff that came from here. I was always very interested in the idea that there's a lot of stuff that is only ours that doesn't translate elsewhere. And then also very interested in what translates elsewhere and why. For some reason, as an early, even like preteen music fan, that was very interesting to me, because I would listen to 1050 Chum and I would notice that during the day you wouldn't hear that many Canadian songs, and then after 9 p.m. or something, they'd cram them all in there. It was like the all Canadian hour for like 3 hours. I was like, why am I only hearing Rough Trade and Blue Peter and whatever else? The payolas like after 9 p.m. I don't understand what's
Cramming
happening.
all their Canadian content into
So the
one area.
politics of that kind of fascinated me early on too. It's like, we're ashamed of this stuff, so we're just going to like tuck it away over here. It's like, well, why are we like that as Canadians? That doesn't make any sense. So that actually was a very formative experience, I think, discovering about how the degrees to which we respect our own music and the ways we treat music. and again, I think that the Hip are very much their own thing. And during that last tour, it's like, you read all these very overly explanatory articles about like, well, they're blues-based rock sound. It's like, really, maybe the first couple, but not really the rest.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
Really went away, yeah.
Yeah. It does very interesting me seeing people try and describe what the Tragically Hip is. Like, imagine, what U2 is to Ireland and what Springsteen is to America, mixed with a bit of Bob Dylan and mystery. And it's like, and REM. It's like, well, good luck trying to figure out what that sounds like. if I'd never heard them before and I'm reading that description, I'd be like, oh, really?
That sounds awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, it's strange though when you think about, like how epically big they were. So I think that makes it difficult to describe that band as well. Just their giant appeal, right? In this country. And like forget about genre, forget about like what the records sound like. There's just, something enormous about the appeal that they had in this country. So that muddles it a little bit when you're trying to, or muddies it a little bit when you're trying to, explain what the hell this thing is, I think.
But it's also like, as someone points out in the book, lots of people are just successful in their own country, and it's like, North Americans, for the most part, don't really get Serge Gainsbourg, or Jacques Brel or whatever, Herbert Grönemeyer or some German superstar that we have like just, what is happening? Heino, I don't know, whatever. But you know what I mean? Like some things don't translate to different contexts, different cultural contexts, and that's totally fine. And that makes it exotic. There's lots of bands who are, we know a lot of the famous Australian bands, but there's tons of Australian bands who don't break out of Australia.
For sure.
Like for every INXS or Midnight Oil or whoever, there's dozens of people who just never make it.
There's the go-betweens.
Exactly. Well, yeah, a great example. Yeah.
Great band.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works. So when your approach to music writing is were you wanting to write when you dove into it? Was it to explore your interest? Did you want to look at the live experience, the album experience? What were you drawn to as a writer?
Just everything. I was. I don't know. That's hard to.
Sorry, it's a little bit of a.
That's hard to answer.
Blanket question.
I spent all my spare time writing and thinking and playing music, and that was just my obsession. And I do feel like the more I grow older, and as I've always been growing older, I feel like just having music around me, I think, helps me process things. I get very irritable if I'm not around music.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I think it quiets the brain. I think that maybe without it, this hum builds up in the brain, and then it's very therapeutic in many ways. Not just ABBA, but all music. So in that sense, it was always very important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I feel the same way. If I don't get a little bit of time for music in my day, then I'm a little bit off.
And live music, I do feel like if I don't go for a while, it's like I need to go to church. Like I need to go and have that communion with a performer, and be around other people and have that experience. Like I do really miss it if I don't see at least one show a month or something.
Sure, that's great. What's the last show you saw?
Last show I saw was the very last show I saw was Dinner is Ruined, who are a big part of the book. They played the Dakota on Friday night.
No, that's great.
They're a rare sighting these days.
Absolutely.
And they're all beautiful people, and it's totally ridiculous and different every time. And
it's a great venue to see them too.
It was, yeah. And it was a lot of fun. And I think before that was Great Lakes Swimmers at Danforth Music Hall.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. It's good to experience the live thing, You forget sometimes if you go a long period without it and how necessary it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of the appeal of this band being the Hip, is that the reason people went to see them so often was because Gord Downie wanted it to be different every night. He once described every live set as like every show is a problem after which he wanted to throw solution after solution after solution, like just see what what would happen?
Right.
And part of the reason the book is titled The Never Ending Present, there's many reasons, but one of them is that was his approach to performance. And that was, we don't know what's going to happen on this stage tonight, and we're going to figure it out together, you know? And one of the most interesting things about researching the book that I found was the crossover, the Venn diagram crossover in the audience between Hip fans and Dead fans, Grateful Dead. And that shocked me. In retrospect, I don't know why, because I thought about it. I do have a lot of friends who fall into that Venn diagram.
Sure.
Because I really hate the Dead, and I always have, and I've done blind taste tests.
Me as well.
Oh, I'm right there with you.
Well, like I lived in Guelph for 12 years, so I had a maximum exposure and lots of blind taste tests. You know, you walk into a party, you're like, what is this shit? Oh, it's the Dead. Oh, fuck, of course it is. But, you know, obviously I have enough friends who are into them enough that I have a measure of respect, and I have a lot of respect for the non-musical aspects of the Dead. But I think with the appeal there of both those bands to the same people is that what's going to happen on stage tonight, right? And with the Dead, you are, I'm assuming you are like, you know, you're looking to ride the same wave they are, and you're kind of zoning in, whether it's Garcia's guitar playing or whoever else in the band, you kind of connect on that wavelength, and spiritually you're there with them, and you're going there. And so with the Hip, sometimes maybe it's Rob Baker's guitar playing, but I think for 98% of the time it's Gord and what he's doing. And he would also communicate in code. So you might go to that show knowing all the lyrics to the songs, and that's great. But as you know, there'd be parts in the show where he would go off somewhere else. Most of the time, he would either be workshopping something new, as we know when you go back and listen to those things, that many songs we would later come to know appear in other songs. Or he'd be singing his favorite song by the Weakerthans or Jane Siberry or Crowded House or something totally random. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes he would be doing that to make a lyrical connection with the song he's actually supposed to be singing at the time. Or there would be some reason he would be singing. It wasn't just that he happened to hear it that day. And so as an audience member, you're there in the audience, and you know you might be one of 100 people who know who the Weakerthans are in that audience. Right. And one of 20 who are picking up on the fact that he's singing this particular song. But what, you know what I mean? Like, you feel very special as an audience member.
Absolutely.
Because you feel like you are connecting with this weird thing that's happening in Gord Downie's head, you know. Or if you're lucky enough to actually figure out the 2 or 3 person narrative he's enacting in front of you. Right.
I've said it before. They're the only band I can think of that has Easter eggs.
Yes,
you know?
That's another great way of putting it. Yeah. My friend Kate Fenner, who is the only backup vocalist ever tour with the band, and therefore had in-ear monitors, said, you know, she came off stage one night and she said to Gord, I really liked what you're doing there. I enjoyed that little dialogue between the two. And he's like, you're the only person who's ever heard, like, you know, who would ever know that because you have the earphones. So it's lots of Easter eggs all over the place in every show, you know. And I think that was a big part of the appeal. Reason people went back.
It's unpredictability, you know. And
night after night, people who would like book their vacations around, you know, American tours and go see them year after year. Even if the new record doesn't hit, they're still going to go to see the live show because
I can see the Dead thing, you know, the connection for the live experience and how, you know, drawn in you can be by the Hip. Another odd band that got connected to the Dead thing when the Dead was no more. A bunch of Deadheads started following Ween around.
Right.
Which at first I was like, but then later I'm like, oh right, no, that makes sense. Makes total sense. So.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you need a deep catalog, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, both those bands cover that.
Yeah.
The Hip certainly does, and for me that was always the appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw them a whack of times in a pretty short amount of time. I think I fall into a category that a lot of people fall into. That I was
there for the 90s.
I was there. Yeah, I was there, and then I faded away and saw them sporadically, you know, after that point. But even then, if, like you say, if I wasn't as familiar with the record, I would go and hear, you know, a song off, you know, Day for Night that they didn't play live on the Day for Night tour, but they're throwing it in there right now as a deep cut. Yeah, and it's so it's almost like gamification of music, right? Like you're there and you're like, I win. I have a bingo card that. You know.
Yeah. And as I learned while researching this book, because my live experience is very similar to yours in terms of chronology. I learned that people were well aware that they hadn't played Fiddler's Green for 12 or 15 years or something, and then suddenly it popped up again in 2006. Or there's a couple other songs like that were noticeably absent from set lists for more than a decade, and then would suddenly come back or never come back. I think 38 Years Old never did come back.
Really?
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. I think I might be wrong about that. It was certainly off set list for a very long time. Yeah.
So your experience with the band then, was like through their rise up?
Yeah. So certainly not day one, because I didn't grow up in Kingston and I was too young. But basically, ever since Q107 first started playing Small Town Bring Down in 1988, I guess it came out in December 87 in Kingston and everywhere else, January 88. And then I saw them at Molson Park in Barrie for, I think, a CFNY picnic. And they were on at 1 p.m. And I can't remember who headlined. It was either Jeff Healey or The Box.
Oh, wow. The
wow.
Box.
See? I've told that story on stage many times, and people are like, who are The Box?
Closer together.
Really?
Yeah.
I actually, the first two Box records, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, sure.
And I heard L'Affaire de Mouche in the store the other day. It was walking on a thin line of insanity. And but anyway, the Hip were on at 1 p.m., which gives you an idea of how big they were, which was not at all.
Yeah.
And I was riveted. I was a big fan of the Gruesomes at the time, garage band of Montreal, Og Records. And I thought they were very similar because they clearly loved like 60s garage R&B. They had like the nasal singer. And they were just really exciting. And, I think we're all of the same premium vintage here. The 80s is a weird time for rock and roll. And a lot of 80s records sounded like garbage. Like even great bands made garbage sounding records. And the Hip always sounded really raw and electric. And that was very evident seeing them. So I saw them whenever I could. Again, I was born in 71, so I couldn't get into a bar legally until 90. Although I grew a beard at age 16, which helped a bit. Nice. But I saw them at the Interior Place Forum in the concert hall, and
oh wow,
and wherever I could. And then
you saw him at the Forum.
The Forum, that was
with the rotating stage.
Oh yeah, where he lit his boots on fire during Boots Are Hearts. I think it was the last show of the tour, and he lit his boots on fire on stage.
That's great.
And he was paddling. He was standing on the not the railing or balcony. What do you call it? Just whatever, the thing that separates the stage. And he was standing on that as the stage turned, and he was like canoeing around.
Man,
it.
that's
And
awesome.
but then I think that was the last place I saw them for a couple of years. I don't think I saw them again until 94. So I took like at least 2 or 3 years off.
Right.
And that's their first arena outing.
Yeah, well, I didn't see them in the
sure.
arena. I didn't go see them because I was just starting to get into other kinds of music, and the Rheostatics became my favorite band.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm in university, so your mind's being blown by all kinds of things. And the Tragically Hip were very popular, and it was hard to see them. So it was like, okay, well, maybe there's somebody else's band now. But then I went to see them in 94, the infamous Canada Day show with Lanois and Spirit of the West and Rheostatics and Eric Strip and everybody. And it was amazing. It was, I thought it was, because I hadn't seen them since they'd become huge. So that was I went from seeing them with like 12,000 people at the Forum or whatever that holds, and to 40,000 people.
Right.
And everybody singing back every line.
Yeah.
And I was very conscious that I was witnessing someone at the peak of their powers. I felt like this is like, seeing Hendrix in 68, or this is like seeing the Clash in 78 or whatever. Like it felt like that to me. And the whole lineup, like the whole day, I was a big fan of pretty much.
It was a great
everybody on that bill. So
I was there that day too.
Yeah,
and
all day. Yeah,
phenomenal day.
Yeah. So and that day is really what inspired me to write the book Have Not Been the Same, which came out in 2001. I co-wrote that with 2 friends, and that was like looking at the lineup that day made me want to write that book. And then so after that, I again, like you, I saw them every tour after that through the 90s. And then I saw them, ended up seeing them 3 times in 2000 for a couple of different reasons. And then not again until 2009, actually. Again, I was just listening to less rock and roll and getting into different things.
Sounds very similar to mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm about 09 or 10. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really liked We Are the Same. My lady really liked We Are the Same, and she hadn't seen them in many, many years. And our friend Jim Bryson was playing in the band. So all these things were like, hey, let's go see the Tragically Hip again. And it was amazing.
If there's a goal that everyone remembers, it was back in old 72. We all squeezed the stick and we all pulled the trigger. All I remember is sitting beside you. You said you didn't give a fuck about hockey, and I never saw someone say that before. You held my hand and we walked on the long way. You were looser than my grip on Bobby. Isn't it amazing if it feels accomplished? When these little sensations get in your way, I'm going fishing, whispering over your shoulder. Isn't it amazing you can do anything? We hung out together every single moment. Started with ordinary people do. Complete with the grip of artificial chaos and believing in the country of me and you. Prices of faith and prizes in the Kremlin. Yeah, we'd heard all that before. It's winter time, the house of solitude with options. Loosen in the grip on the fake Cold War. Isn't it amazing once again accomplished? When you don't let the nation get in your way, and no ambition feels the rain over your shoulder. Isn't it amazing you can do anything? Next to your comments in the National Fitness Program, time till the turn of Flintstone hang. Nothing to the man in a bit of laughter. Show your patience, tolerance, or respect. Fireworks explode in the distance. Temporary tower store. Fireworks emulating heaven till there are no stars anymore. Fireworks demonstrated heaven. Temporary tower store till there's no stars shining up in heaven. Till there are no stars anymore. Isn't it amazing that it feels accomplished? When these little sensations get in your way, no inhibition whispering over your shoulder. Isn't it amazing you can do anything? Oh, and this one thing probably never goes away. This one thing is always supposed to stay. This one thing doesn't have to go away. Thank you.
Taking that break and not having seen the evolution, I hadn't seen him really as a dancer, right? Which by 2009 he was in, like he had been for a while, but
Yeah.
he was just a completely different performer, and that was incredible to witness, you know. But then
I've never heard it described that way. A dancer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was like pirouetting around and just very expressive. And you know, the theory that a couple people float in the book is that he went from, you know, he was known for rants, so-called rants, And then you could tell he was kind of getting sick of doing that. And then around 2000, he starts studying choreography with Andrea Nan, who's married to his friend Andy Mays of the Skydiggers. And then he finds a new mode of improvisatory expression. Right. So he starts improvising through gesture and movement a lot more. Whereas before he was just kind of like rock and roll guy, shake your head, kick, turn around, drop the mic, and now he became very much more great intent in every move, and you really see that in the final tour and the final show, like big time, really playing with gesture and clowning and and I mean he's not a great dance, like he's not Prince or and he's not, I don't think he's even a great like modern dancer necessarily, but he knew those tools and he knew how to use them. And he used them in a way that very few people do, like maybe you're someone like Bowie or Annie Lennox or people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I like when you say clowning. I went to the Humber School of Comedy, and one of the programs that we had to take was clowning or le jeu, and it was now that you say that, it's like I'm envisioning him on stage, like his face, right? Like he was so expressive.
Yeah, that connected a lot of dots right there.
Yeah.
Well, especially in the last year, because he couldn't do that much with his body for a variety of reasons, the cancer just being one of them. So there was so much on his face. And I think he was very conscious of that as well, because I think he knew why people were showing up, and he knew what he didn't want the show to be. And so I think, I mean, who knows? But I feel like he went into that tour with great intent about what he was going to be doing facially. Which again, who thinks about that? Like how many performers, he knew that people would be watching the monitors, watching for signs of fallibility or, something. And he was very conscious of that, I think. Again, a theory.
No, I'm
I
with
would
you.
think so.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
I kind of got that feeling with the performance in the last tour of 100th Meridian, which has that quite sing-alongable bridge. If I die of vanity, which I was really like, how's that that's gonna be really heavy to witness that part of that song. But they played almost it wasn't like the album cut at all for that bridge. It ramped up, it was funkier, it was almost like a little rap.
They've been doing that for a while though.
Had they? Yeah, I hadn't seen them in it, so I wasn't sure, because I feel like that took the tension off of that moment, which I thought was maybe calculated, or at least if it was wisely, because it didn't rob the show of its momentum. Or
they certainly do that on That Night in Toronto, which is 04. So that arrangement of that song is old, but it was powerful, that moment, and that's kind of a moment people wait for in that song.
Oh, sure.
And at the last show, and I have no idea if this is conscious or not. If it is conscious, it's brilliant. If it's not, it's totally understandable. But he only flubbed 2 lines in Kingston. One of them was, "I remember every single fucking thing I know." And that's the line he forgot in that song. Or did he forget it? Or did he just choose not to say that? Anyway, either way, fascinating moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was your experience seeing them live is similar to mine. I'm not a writer. At what point did you do your first story or piece on the hip?
That's an interesting question that I have not been asked all year. I don't remember writing about the hip in the 90s. I think I'm pretty sure I wrote a piece about that Canada Day show. But I was always around much bigger fans than me. Like in the not the newsroom, but whatever. The magazines I worked at, there was always somebody there who was a much bigger hip fan than me. Because I will never win a hip fandom contest, because Like the bar,
that's a
the
tough-
bar is very, very high.
Yeah, it is.
So, so I was never that guy at anywhere I worked. And also, I wrote a lot about a lot of new music and underground music and not rock radio music. So I didn't interview them in the 90s. I was never on that list. And then it wasn't until 2000. So in 2000, my friends and I were writing Have Not Been the Same. And there's a chapter on the Hip. And my friend Jason Schneider was the much bigger Hip fan than I was. So he wrote the chapter in that book. That's how we split that up. We all took chapters. That's how you co-write a book with two other people, is you just clearly delineate who's writing which parts.
Right.
So Jason wrote the Hip chapter, and but I really wanted to interview the Hip as well, because I was writing some of the more overview chapters about like, what does it all mean? And also I was writing the Rheostatics chapter and other like opening people who'd opened for them. So Jason and I went to do the interview together. And I still to this day don't know why they agreed to do the interview, because we were two nobodies who worked, or at that point used to work, for a defunct Alt Weekly. But my friend Chris Brown was playing in the band. He was a keyboardist on that tour. And I sent him the outline of the book, and I think he brought it on the tour bus and said, "Hey, these guys are not schmucks. This looks like an interesting project."
Yeah.
Very.
And I think, again, I don't know. I think what probably appealed to Gord Downie in particular about that book was that it was not a book about the Hip. I think he liked that about it. I think that is for reasons we can talk about later if you want. They never wanted a book written about them. So the fact that this was a book placing them in the context of their peers, I think appealed to him. So it's like, here's a book about all these people, and the Hip is
Right.
just one of the biggest examples of this. So somehow the band and or Jake Gold agreed to give us an interview and told us that the only place it could happen was in Syracuse. Yeah. The face you just made was the exact one. And so, we're like, yes, of course. We'll drive I don't know what it is, 6, 8, I don't know how far. I can't remember how far it is.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to go to past Kingston, Gananoque, and then south. And and so we had like about 2 hours with Downie in a hotel room, and at least another hour with Sinclair on the bus, and
Wow.
and talked about all kinds of things. Why am I bringing all this up? Oh, because I'd never really written about them before. So
Right.
yeah,
That's right.
so I had so Jason and I did the interview, and then I was also writing for iWeekly at the time, and so this was on the Music at Work tour, and then
That's right.
and then when they played Toronto,
They played Massey Hall, right?
They played Massey Hall.
That's right.
So I had gone to see that, and I actually gave it a lukewarm review in iWeekly
Oh,
because I thought they were kind of tired.
and that was the tour with Kate Fenner.
yeah,
Kate Fenner and
because I was so excited about those two being in the
Chris
band,
Brown. Yeah.
and I thought they were really underutilized on stage. I mean, they did give Kate at least one solo turn. She sang flamenco.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And but I just couldn't feel you couldn't really hear Chris in the mix, and I was just like, I had such high hopes for this, and again I sensed that the band was tired, and as I found out recently, they were like, that was kind of a low point in band morale, and that's I think part of why Gord wanted those other two in the band. So anyway, I wrote a lukewarm review of the show. 6 months later, we end up interviewing the band. That goes well. And then they were coming back to do their arena show at ACC, I guess. And so I did and they somehow iWeekly got the interview, or they agreed to. And anyway, and so Gord found out that I might be doing the interview. So he's like, "Yes, I want Michael to do it." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, that's amazing." So I interviewed him again there for a cover story in iWeekly. And then there was one other thing I did in the 2000s. I can't remember off the top of my head now. It was a Sarah Harmer story for Exclaim, and I interviewed him as like a character witness, like a secondary source. It's like, tell me why Sarah Harmer is great. I mean, I know, but I want to hear Gord Downie say why Sarah Harmer is great. And we have many mutual friends, and I'd run into him occasionally. Oh, and he wrote the foreword to Have Not Been the Same. He gave us a poem to run as the foreword. So his name was on the cover of that book in a larger type size than the 3 authors of the book, which I think he was a little pissed off about.
Sure.
But yeah, and again, so I didn't write about them again until the final tour at McLean's. And anyway, long story short, McLean's didn't know what they were going to do about the tour, and nobody, I think, really knew how big it would become. And I was a copy editor there. I wasn't a writer. I mean, I did some writing for them, but my job there was as copy editor. And they were kind of like, "Hey, copy editor, you know something about music? Maybe you should write about the hip." I'm like, "Yes, I should, actually. You're making the correct decision." So I just started interviewing people randomly. Plaskett, Bedini, Cuddy, Sarah. And just started putting those up online. And they really went viral, as they say in the business. And that was even before I'd written the actual story. Which told me that people were really hungry for in-depth, interesting pieces about the hip, as opposed to just like, "Hey, they're Canada's band."
Yeah.
Like, okay, great. Tell me a bit more. And tragedy. It's like, okay, well, great. Tell me a bit more, So then I had the cover story in in McLean's. And that was very well received on many fronts, and management asked for copies. And so that made me think that there should be a book, because there never has been a book. And so that's why we're here today.
This is a song that tries to answer a question that, say, a 6-year-old girl might ask you. Going off class. Why is the
Did you transition right into it's time to write a book, or how did the?
No, it wasn't until a couple months later, and I also I asked them they had requested copies of the McLeans, and I thought I'd just drop them off personally to the office. I'd never met Bernie Breen before, so we just had a little chat, and I was like, "Have you ever thought about a book?" And he's like, "Why don't send me a proposal? I'll show it to the band, see what happens." Because ultimately, it's not his call; it's the band's.
Yep.
So I didn't hear back, and totally understandable. I mean, Secret Path was coming out, completely understand why that was on nobody's radar.
Sure.
And then a couple months later in February, I asked again, didn't hear back. And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Like, it has to be done. Somebody has to do this. I want to do it before somebody does a hack job and sells a bunch of copies of a shitty book that's going to rip people off.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to do it. And then I got a book contract, and then I emailed them the day I got the contract. I said, well, look, I am doing it. So just so you know, if you can open any doors, I didn't really expect the band to talk, because again, they never have. But, and then they just said they would not, they would neither endorse nor assist in this project, because they're working on a book of their own.
Right.
And that was one line email.
Right.
So
Fair enough.
I thought, well, I'm still doing it. So
copy that.
yeah. So I did. So I talked to everybody else that I could. I mean, obviously a lot of people I didn't hear back from, but,
Sure.
but a lot of people I did. And,
You at that point knew what you wanted to accomplish with the book. Like, you knew you had a basic outline of what you were looking to accomplish.
yeah, I knew I wanted to tell the chronological story. And I also knew that there were enough interesting things in this story that made me think about so many other things, that I could use this band as a prism to talk about, poetry and music, because Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize the same year we were all thinking about Gord Downie.
Yeah.
And suddenly people are talking about our lyrics poetry. I'm like, funny you should ask, because I've been thinking a lot about this guy in Canada. So, I knew that there would be a chapter on poetry. I knew that there would be a chapter, just about Secret Path and Indigenous issues and so-called reconciliation and residential schools. I knew that I wanted to write a chapter just about opening bands. I didn't want to stop the narrative of the book to suddenly talk about By Divine Right somewhere. I was like, okay, let's just talk in one place about all the times they were great to opening bands and what that meant, and what's it like to play to people who are booing you, and just all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then as I thought about it more, I'm like, oh yeah, well, let's talk about all the hockey songs at once. Let's have one chapter just about hockey.
That's great.
The cover bands.
And then cover bands, which was a total revelation. I was like, this is the only
Mind-blowing.
Canadian act that consistently for 30 years has had this whole cottage industry of cover bands.
Yeah.
During the 70s and 80s, I'm sure there were a bunch of Rush cover bands, but there aren't today.
No.
There aren't a bunch of Bryan Adams cover bands. There aren't a bunch of Shania Twain cover bands. Whoever you want to name, your most popular. But the hip always in almost every province.
Oh yeah.
And that fascinates me. And what's it like being in a cover band when the person you're covering is dying in front of you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to write about that as well. A lot of fans hate that chapter, by the way. I mean, a lot of people like it in general, but one of the biggest criticisms I've heard from fans is like, why the hell would you write about cover bands? Because for a lot of fans,
fascinating.
Well, I was very snobby about cover bands. I had never gone to see one before in my life for anybody.
You saw 3, right? For the book?
I went to see 3 while researching the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've since seen, actually, no, I've only seen one other one. I did a couple things out east with the Fabulously Rich.
Oh, okay.
From Charlottetown, who are hands down the best of any of them I've seen.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Completely and fully. They are this guy, Dennis Ellsworth, who also put out one of my favorite records this year. He's an incredible singer-songwriter. Albums produced by Joel Plaskett. Amazing songs. And then when the tragic news hit, he decided to... he was getting together with his old high school band for a reunion gig. Then they realized no one wants to hear us play our old songs. We were never that popular. And then they thought they would learn a bunch of hip tunes and do like a benefit show for the brain Gord's I'm blanking on the actual name, but the Sunnybrook Foundation.
Right.
Yeah. So they did, and they're really good. And Dennis doesn't try to imitate Gord or like anything like. It's just like, this is a great band playing these songs, and they've raised like more than $10,000 for both Downie, Wenjack, and
that's amazing.
Sunnybrook.
I think that's great. Yeah, it seems to me that's what a lot of the bands are doing at this
They're
point.
doing it
too,
for
right?
love,
Yeah.
and they take like half the money they make. They take to obviously cover their time, and you know, nobody's getting rich off it. And then, despite the name of the band, and then they donate the other half.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And they're amazing. So, but anyway, so I knew I wanted to write about cover bands. I wish I'd talked to Dennis before I wrote that, because that would have been another interesting part of it. And then I also wanted to talk about what Gord's journey means in a larger rock and roll history context. You know, because that had never been done before. People think it's this Canadian story that, you know, oh, the guy from the Tragically Hip toured with terminal cancer. That's fascinating. It's like, it's more than,
Oh yeah.
like, that has never happened anywhere.
No.
At the arena level, a national icon confronting mortality like that.
No.
The only other people who have done it are either not the singer. So like Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys did a tour when he was, and he played sitting down the whole time. But nobody knew. Like, it wasn't a public thing.
Right.
Nobody was going to see the Beach Boys saying, oh, this is Carl Wilson's last tour with him.
Right.
Also, most Beach Boys bands don't even know who Carl Wilson is. Def Leppard's guitarist is also, I forget his actual condition, but he tours in between treatments, basically. And Sharon Jones, who I read about in the book, who is incredibly inspiring, but not as well known and not touring at an arena level,
Right.
which is a whole other can of worms. So yeah, it was incredibly unusual. So I wanted to talk about, I wanted to just draw other parallels and metaphors from the way other people did it, from, you know, Warren Zevon to Sharon Jones. And, you know, there's tons of examples I could have used, but I kind of focused on like just the 2000s
Sure.
onward, you know, and like Johnny Cash's final records and all that stuff.
It was a very wild experience. There really isn't anything like it when there was so much emotion flowing through everyone, and to get such a massive, I don't want to say a payoff or something like that, but there was like a crescendo of events having the tour.
Yeah.
Coupled by, there was a new Hip album,
Yeah.
then a new Gord album, and then another Gord album.
Yeah.
So many things happened,
Yeah.
and all of them were wonderful. It was such a great way to deal with this, you know, horrible thing going on. There's all this beauty and uniqueness happening at the same time. It's really quite
and
something.
Man Machine Poem is one of my favorite Hip records. It's like they're going out on a high note.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
And it's amazing to me. So the announcement was May 2016, and then the tour happens and it builds because Victoria and Vancouver tickets were going for face value.
Yeah.
Because I think people were still pretty scared.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until reviews started coming in from the West that the real scramble started happening in Ontario. Like, oh, wait a minute, this is good and this is amazing.
Yeah.
So you have that crescendo, as you beautifully put it, and then he dies 18 months. Anyway, about a year and a half after we find out the news, he dies, and then obviously there's mourning. So there's mourning at the news, there's mourning at the passing, and then 6 months after that, my book comes out. And people are obviously still very interested. And then I do a book tour this fall, and people are still mourning.
Yeah.
I think because, like, I ran into people who was like, hey, I bought your book 6 months ago. I haven't been able to read it yet emotionally, which I totally get. But it's interesting to me. So, you know, I'm a huge Prince fan. Prince just disappears. Like no inkling anything's wrong. Then he's gone. So you spend the next couple of weeks listening to a bunch of music. And then I didn't really listen to a lot of Prince after that for a while. And then now a bunch of stuff is coming out. Like he put out that amazing piano and a microphone record.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh my God. But anyway, so, they put out a compilation of like 90s and 2000s stuff, some of which I'd never heard. And it's not a good compilation. I can get into the why that is, but it did make me listen to other things. Like, okay, well, this is not very good, but how would I do it? Then I started listening to, anyway.
Right.
So, but generally, like someone disappears and then you go through that thing for a couple of weeks, you know, whether it's Tom Petty or whoever it is, Bowie. And then, but like almost 2 years later, are you still in that emotional state? Generally, no. I don't think so. But with Downie, they were and are.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's because, like you said, it wasn't just like boom. It was like, here's the news. Everyone's like, oh shit, and then like all this other stuff comes out, and all this beauty comes out.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the recorded output and also just the spirit of generosity, the ripple effect he had about the way so-called white Canada perceives Indigenous issues. And the way so many things, there's a quote, Laurie Anderson in the book has this great quote about, I believe the purpose of death is the release of love. And if there's any purpose to all of this, then I think that's what happened with Gord's passing. All these people, rediscovering what this music meant to them, their love of this man and this band and this work, but also, love for each other, like fan communities really bonded together. There's lots of great things happening with different initiatives. People do like fundraising things all around this stuff. And I think even just people think about, their families and communicating to people now, like tell the people you love them now, because you really don't know what's going to happen. So it was really this galvanizing event on many different levels.
how have you found the book tour?
It was great. I loved.
Was there a tour for Have Not Been the Same or
No.
Okay, so this is a new thing for you.
Book tour is a new thing for me. So
Yeah.
I booked it all myself. And there were a couple of invitations from like writers festivals, but generally, I booked 42 dates this year, including 18 dates across the country in 3 weeks in October. So I went from Halifax to Vancouver. I did Ontario in April, May, and Buffalo. So this was everything but Ontario. And yeah, just meeting the super, super geeky people who love to share their theories on different things. They like to tell me how wrong I am about in-between evolution. They tell me just beautiful stories about their connection to the music or the time they met so-and-so. Yeah, like there were some book events that were amazing with like more than 100 people there. And then there were some with like just 4 or 5 people there. But those 4 or 5 people are the best people because they came.
Yeah.
But I also had some amazing conversations with like people in Medicine Hat and Saskatoon. Those were 2 particularly sparse gigs, but the people who showed up to them were really beautiful. And we just had a great time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I got to see the country. So
yeah. How about that?
Which I haven't done since I was on tour like 23 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. And that's kind of a nice way to cap all those experiences. Go to, get a good look at Canada,
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if through your research with the book, what's your most favorite sort of story in the book that you learned? Something you didn't know before.
Wow. Well, there's quite a few. There's quite a few. I'll just pick one that I didn't know that surprised me was the making of Secret Path. So it came out in the fall of 2016. A lot of people have the misconception that it was made post-diagnosis because they've really intertwined, or they just they like to believe that Gord Downie, facing his own mortality, consciously chose to highlight the 50-year-old death of this Indigenous boy, and that became his life's work. Right? That's how people receive that. But he started making that record in 2012, 4 years before, as a fully healthy person. So he became aware, his brother actually first became aware of the Wenjack story through CBC Radio Doc. And anyway, long story short, they agreed to do something. They don't know what it's going to be. Maybe a film, maybe Gord's just going to write some poems. He doesn't know. And then coincidentally, Kevin Drew calls him up kind of out of the blue, because that's something Kevin Drew does, a lot of chutzpah. And he says, hey, I want to make a record with you. And Gord's like, great. Kevin's like, I got some studio times. Like, what's, have you got any songs? And Gord's like, nope. And he says, actually, I have these poems I just started writing. Kevin says, great. So they start making a record, and with Dave Hamlin, and I'm trying to remember who the core people. I know the people who are on the record. I'm trying to think of like who's on every track. Like I know Charles Spearin is on it and Kevin Hearn's on it. But anyway, they make a record, and then they finish it. I think they finished it in 2014. Yeah, early 2014. But Gord didn't tell them what the album was about, and they had no idea.
Oh wow!
Until about halfway through. And then he sat them down and said, by the way, you should know, this is a concept record. And tells them the story, and they're floored because they are equally ignorant of residential school history, as much of Canada was. So now they're like super excited about this music they're making with Gord. And then they finish the record, and they're so pumped. and Gord says, "All right, boys, thank you very much. This record will come out in 2.5 years." And they're like, "What? What are you talking about? This is great. Like, people have to hear this." And but he wanted to time it to the 50th anniversary of Wenjack's death,
Right.
because being who he is, he knows that if you have a media hook, and because another great what if of this story is, I love Gord's solo records. Most people have never heard them.
Mm-hmm.
So commercially, a Gord Downie solo record was, would basically make a ripple. So no one was like,
Particularly at this point.
particularly at that point, because people,
Coke Machine Glow and Battle of the News, some press and notoriety, but they, for a Grand Bounce
and Grand Bounce is so incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And it just like, nobody, it just passed without a trace.
Yeah.
I love that record.
Yeah.
So nobody cared about Grand Bounce. Very few people cared about Now for Plan A, except for the hardcore fans. It was their lowest selling record. So in 2012, nobody's itching for a new Gord Downie record.
Right.
So, so that's a big what if for me. Like, if this just came out, if Gord Downie's healthy 52-year-old man, would anybody care? I don't know. Another thing I don't know is how conscious he was or not of when the TRC report was wrapping up and when that would be released, and because that obviously would raise media profile of the issue in general. So, but anyway, he wanted time it to the 50th anniversary. So that's what he did. So he collapsed in December 2015, and then obviously that's an intense period for at least a few months there, 3, 4, 5 months, and then getting ready for the tour, and then the tour, but he and the book was already lined up as well. So the album and book were always going to be a package. But then but what did change is he did decide that they also wanted to animate it and make it an even bigger deal. So the animation was a rush job, and the guy who did that, Justin Stevenson, worked 18-hour days for 6 months.
Right.
It was finished 2 weeks before the first show.
Oh, wow.
2 weeks before it was going to go to air. So and starting up the foundation and all that other stuff, that was definitely, yes, this is my life's mission with what I have left, and that but the whole thing actually dates back much earlier. And I do think that he reached Tragically Hip fans, and he reached a lot of Canadians who would just rather not think about this at all, right? And in that sense, it's a success.
It's an enormous victory.
And it's because the sad truth is that Indigenous people can articulate this and raise the issue as much as they want, but there's a large segment of the population who will just never listen to that. And the TRC report, it did make a splash, but I think it made a splash among certain segments, and I don't. I think you do need something like that. I make the parallel in the book, the same way the Syrian refugee crisis needed Alan Kurdi's photograph. This issue needed a face, and it wasn't the face of Gord Downie, but Gord Downie found the face and said, "This is a lens. This is a story through which we can understand this larger issue." And that's a lot of people's entry point. And he was also very clear that that this was news to him, and that he felt betrayed by Canadian history that he had been fed. So he's like, "Look, it's okay if you didn't know before, because I didn't know either."
Yeah.
So right away, people don't feel like they're being lectured to.
Right.
Right. So they don't feel like, here's somebody else complaining about something. He's like, this is someone they recognize and know, saying, "Hey, no, there's something I want you to know." So in that sense, I think it totally succeeded.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, I think so too. And I have listened to the audio version of your book, and I think.
How did Strombo do?
I think he did really well. Really grateful that you could join us tonight and share some stories.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation. It's great to dig in deep and not do the 5-minute quick hit.
Yeah. Do you? Do you plug the book? Do you have anything that you want to
It's available now through ECW Press and fine retailers everywhere.
Great.
It's it's out in hardcover. There's a paperback coming in the spring, so I might pop my head up again and do some things around then.
Right.
And the audiobook George Strombopoulos narrated, and I haven't listened to the whole thing because I'm not that vain. But I'm a little bit vain, but I'm not all the way vain. but I'm told he did a great job. He's been an amazing ambassador. He's been interviewed about the book, and he's just been great. I'm really happy to have had him on board and representing it. And it was very personal for him too, because he knew the band better than I did, and he said he had to, stop the tape and pull away from the microphone quite a bit near the end, and so I'm very grateful that he was involved.
Yeah, I don't think he could have gotten anyone better to do that. That's about as good as it gets, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
Speaking of as good as it gets.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Well, congrats on the whole podcast.
Thanks.
Fully and Completely is a Modern Superior podcast, proudly sponsored by Long Slice Brewery. To rate, review, or subscribe to the show, visit Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or anywhere else you get podcasts. For more information about the show, our guests, or Jamie and Greg, please visit www.fullyandcompletely.ca. To join our Facebook group, visit Facebook and search for Fully and Completely.
This episode has been brought to you by the Modern Superior Podcast Network.